Welcome back, guys. Today we're joined by Paul Plewman and his young friend Bertie. Paul's works for Currency Transfer. He's someone we've worked with in the past, so thanks for coming along, Paul. If you could just introduce yourself and your experience, please.
Thanks very much for having me. Probably better known as FX Plew. I'm actually Paul Plewman, and I've been in the industry for a long time now. Started way back in 2004, 2005 for a quaint little brokerage called Roosh International. It was kind of a big deal. They got bought by Travelex, and I survived that acquisition and I was given their private client desk to run for a while.
Is that your first taste of management, private client side?
Yeah, I mean, I was a senior in the sales team, so I had a few reports, but I wasn't motivated by their performance. It was more just mentoring. Private clients at Travelex, I was responsible for the team day to day. I reported into Richard Kirk, who was a great mentor of mine. Did that for a few years. And then David Clark took me out of Travelex over to Cambridge, and I was a sort of a senior BDM there, external sales guy, and traveling from meeting to meeting. They were very much focused on face-to-face sales rather than the phone brokerage that had gone before. And then from there, I took the plunge and tried my own thing. I launched a joint venture with the Sable Group. Sable International was effectively their corporate desk, but it was a JV between myself and Sable. Reg Bamford there was a great mentor. I owe an awful lot to him for taking a punt and supporting me through that journey. Shout out to Reg. He's actually a 5, maybe even 6 times world champion at croquet. Don't
see that very often, do you? Yeah.
Well, he always used to say, if you want to be the best at a sport, choose one that nobody plays. And then from there, when we sort of parted company, we had actually started with Currency Transfer. The relationship had already started. Dan and Stevan, who are the co-founders at Currency Transfer, wanted, basically at launch, the model was built on the Currency Cloud API, and I was a Currency Cloud white label way back in the day before it got cool. I went to see them and explain that I was leaving Sable and the relationship would be handed over, and Dan basically took me for a beer straight away in Covent Garden. And effectively pitched me the job. He said, look, I'm very good at marketing, I'm the CEO, we've got Stevan, who's very good at tech, he's a CTO, we've kind of got a bit of a hole in the business that for sales and operations, and we need a safe pair of hands, and there they are.
Are they insured?
Sadly not, no. I was a music scholar at school, so insurance was something discussed at family level. But
it's not like Beyonce, or was it Mariah Carey's legs, was it? That was insured for like 7 million back in the day? Yeah.
And so Currency Transfer, we've been, at the coalface for about 8 years now, and it's going great guns, really.
Currency Transfer is a very interesting brand, aren't they? Because they're more like a compare the market, I would say. You've got so many different lines and products that you can use. It doesn't like that.
Popular misconception. No, and we're kind of a victim of our own marketing now. And again, a nod to Dan in the early stages. It was very easy to understand a comparison model, and that's what it was at launch. It was like the client would come in and we would put it open to aggressive price competition to ensure best price guarantee. And again, where a lot of the client acquisition was marketing led, the guys are phenomenal marketeers, and SEO generated an awful lot of leads that came through. So it was a very neat story and a very easy one to understand. We didn't make any money doing that though, because the brokers that we were plugged into, and myself included back in the Sable day, were the age-old price point one, get the relationship, edge them out over time, and get on that merry-go-round. And so it didn't really work. And so within about 6 or 9 months, we pivoted. And pivot being the startup word for failure, we changed the business model entirely, where we what we've got now, what we represent is a payments network, right?
Yeah.
And the mandate that we put to our clients is that every single transaction will be put in front of a best-in-class provider. And then within the currency transfer ecosystem, obviously best price execution is part of the process. But it's not purely price. We absolutely don't sell on price. And the value that we provide to the clients far exceeds just price alone. And, what do they say? If you sell on price, you die on price, and ultimately there's no real longevity in that. So the client value that we fulfill is much deeper. And again, that's also moved with our transition away from being a private client dominated revenue model to one of much more the SME and the business clients. If you can service a private client well enough, that ports over very neatly, in my view, to servicing a business, because it's so much is still personal relationship. If you're dealing with Ethel down the road who's chipping her life savings over to a Spanish villa, the same level of detail, care and attention, if applied to a finance director, is important. It's that personal relationship. The fact that he represents the entity behind him largely is irrelevant. The overall demands that he brings to the relationship are one of care, attention and financial relevance, I suppose. And putting the right service, the right partner and the right payment solution in front of him is all part of the curated solution that we put together. And we've got a lot of different endpoints to build that through. So I think very proudly we do provide a genuinely tailored solution. You see every website out there, a tailored solution, price and service. It's like, sit down.
And they're all just selling spot and forwards at the same rates, and then creeping them up,
Exactly, and part of the reason why we're here, of course, is that we are building out a brand new sales team. We've got some very interesting sales talent heading our way, and part of that process is a rebrand. Currency transfer, as a lot of smilers and dialers will recognise, if you're pitching with anything to do with FX or currency in your company name, it's an immediate hang-up, or it's another barrier that you need to overcome in that grueling 150 calls.
You're allowing your customers to assume, I suppose, just on the brand, on what you do, exactly like I just did earlier, compare the market. I'm just reading what I've read online,
Noted.
Yeah.
So we, the kind of the corporate effort is being rebranded into Plexus, which is kind of an integrated network, which sits very comfortably with what we're actually taking to market while being all mysterious and not clearly currency related. Because again, with the way that the market is moving, a few years ago it was a trendy flow to move away. We're not FX, we're payments. It's like, cool story. Yeah, that's the regulated bit of what you do, but it's always been the case. And apart from Alpha and their success story when they were still unregulated, everybody is a payments company first. The fact that you do FX is, largely irrelevant, but you've got the white boy city lot who like being an FX broker, so they've got it on their business card for when they go to or whatever.
I don't know if that's still open, is it?
It's the ego play.
I don't know, cut the brands though. we don't want to get in trouble here.
I don't think they exist. Paul, so you mentioned about Plexus, and I can assume with that you're looking to build out a sales team. For hiring purposes or sales candidates, what would you say a sales candidate can do to stand out to you?
I'm always looking for honesty, right? Because so many CVs are, creative writing, mine included. And then even in the first interview, it's very easy to represent yourself as something perhaps you're not on the longer term when you really have to roll your sleeves up and get involved. So I run a very informal recruitment process. Like, our sales manager obviously does the CV vetting and the first interviews and actually a sales assessment before I speak to anybody. But from my perspective, I'm always looking for a cultural fit, and across our business, it's very much work hard, play hard. So you need a sense of humour. to laugh at yourself through the hard times as well as put up with my chat. But it's that fit really matters, because from my perspective, I've been blessed with some of the teams that I've worked with, but at the same time, there have been one or two unsavoury characters in a fairly close-knit environment, and it's like, I'd enjoy my job a lot more if you weren't there. Not you. But hey, you know what I mean.
No, I mean, that brings up good points, because I've seen, some top salespeople come and join floors before, and, they bring forward some toxicity from what they've seen in their maybe previous companies, and actually, although they're doing the numbers, like, they actually broke a lot of the sales floor and the environment, the atmosphere, the culture that I think the managers took time over years to build and create, and the damage caused from that. I was privileged enough to work for another business at the time and be able to sort of witness that firsthand, that even if you've got someone who can do the numbers, has to be the right attitude still, because if he's doing the numbers and distracting everyone else or damaging everyone else's chances to go and achieve, then that's a challenge for certainly.
So to your question, like, one of the other elements I look for is a degree of humility and modesty, right? I don't care how good you think you are, and good for you if you can bring those numbers, but if you're not going to be a good fit, and if your numbers are going to tear apart what we've all put many years of blood, sweat and tears into, then sorry, go and spoil somebody else's sales.
Yeah, of course.
But that said, at the moment, that'd be a nice problem to have. Like, the talent just isn't out there in the market. I'm sure you guys are aware it's a very candidate-driven market at the moment, and it's actually moved our focus away from like direct, relevant experience, because our idea is very much, if you can sell, you can sell FX. And so it's those behaviours that we're looking for. And again, like, it's a sign of the times. Having come out of COVID, I think the COVID element has really affected things in a number of different ways. But one is, of course, the businesses are very protective of their talent and to a degree, of course, their book. But the fallacy of, I can bring a book, I don't buy into that in the slightest, nor do I want
of course not.
Hard-won client base.
It's short-windowed, isn't it? If you take them on now, well, in 2 years' time, what's stopping them from leaving and taking that same book plus whatever they've learned through working with you to your competition? So if you've got someone with that professionalism, they're likely to return the favour down the line, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so much more interested in somebody who can build a book than bring a book.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Because anybody purporting to, I can bring a book, it's like, 20% maybe. The rest are actually trading via you with the brand that built the service and the business that you represent. So there's always that kind of, ego check when somebody jumps ship and tries to take their book, and a lot of their client base like, yeah, you were nice, phoning me every Monday and asking me how my weekend was. You didn't really care. I didn't really care in the answer either. But that's not an ethos that we buy into. So we're looking for the behaviours and the kind of the character that really adds value to what we're building. So,
and you can teach everything else, can't you?
Look, yes, absolutely. I'm long enough in the tooth to be able to teach anybody to sell FX. But where I am very time poor is why we've invested in a sales manager. And, between his focus and his own experience and the experience of the wider team, we do believe that we can train the next wave of brokers. But that was the other point I was going to make about COVID. The outfits that were traditionally very good at training new graduates, that whole piece almost seems to have fallen away from the market over the past couple of years, and because it was that much harder to do remotely in lockdown and through the COVID periods. And then when it all got back to normality, a lot of the businesses were focused, rightly so, on preserving what they've got and getting a good grip on the new reality of the client base, of the staffing levels. Rather than going, right, let's get 50 grads in this and go through that whole process again. And so I think there is a bit of a talent glut in the market, because typically those were the guys who would go through the training regime, bang out all the calls, hate their life for a year, but then come out with a little bit of experience and go, do you know what, I am good enough for a job somewhere else. And then the whole process and the career ladder starts. But without that entry point, then we're looking for a needle in a haystack.
It's refreshing to hear, because I think 2 or 3 years ago, when we first started Fintech-Rec, everyone was looking for only FX experience, only someone from industry. It wasn't an attitude hire, it was very much, let's look at the experience. So we would be mitigating many hires on, let's say, someone who's had 3 jobs in 3 years, so they've proven 3 times that they can't do the job effectively. That's what, from my experience, tells me, traditionally that's what we're looking at. You can't tarnish with the same brush, but you can start picking up on trends in recruitment, so it's refreshing to see businesses today, particularly on the back end of the pandemic, coming out of it and offering better opportunity for people.
But that's an interesting one. I mean, obviously that's a massive red flag of like, why did you only stay there a year?
Yeah.
Was it attitude? Was it performance? Was it whatever? But similarly, I apply that to anybody in sales because, I have a personal belief that you never get rid of a performing salesman. And so if my top biller came to me, said, I'm leaving, and he was just banging out new every month and growing the business base, my first question is like, what have we got to do to keep you?
Yeah.
Because it's so much easier and probably cheaper in the long term to give him 10, 15, 20% of whatever he needs. Maybe not commission, but...
So your staff might be watching this,
It's an open book. It's a very transparent process that we run. But yeah, I would much rather sit down and engage with talent and go, what can we do? Like, why? Why are you looking to leave? Because if you just take the resignation and you don't understand the why, then, the other guys in the same team may be struggling with the same dynamic and the same reason that's causing him to move first. So it's very much a case of, what is it? What can we do to keep the band together, really? And then, so I'm always a little bit cynical of, you're a top biller, you're a really good sales, so why are you leaving?
Yeah.
We do see that quite a lot, where you have conversations with people and they're happy in their role, but they still obviously will quite happily have a chat. But it's one of the things, good people are generally looked after well. It's the people that are always continuously looking year after year, who come back on.
As they say, people don't leave salaries, they leave managers, don't they?
Yeah.
All too often you see people leave their jobs. It's not because they're not being paid enough. It's because they're not earning the respect. They may have been there for a certain period of time and thought they're going to be here, and they're not. They're still here, and that's why people tend to start looking elsewhere. It's why we've got to look out for those that are still in 3 jobs in 3 years, because there are occasions where you've got good talent and they've just been mismanaged. But ultimately, I think general rule of thumb is you want to see consistency, you want to see good attitudes, and that's first seen in the CV before you even had the conversation.
But I think there's a lot to be said. I mean, we've talked about it in the past about headhunting talent. Generally, if I engage with a recruiter and they go, oh yeah, I've got 5 amazing CVs ready for you, it's like, I don't want to see them. I want to tell you about what I'm looking for, the DNA, and then I want you to go and find somebody who's already in work.
Yeah.
Rather than interviewing 5 of the same people your competitors are interviewing.
Because, what I firmly believe that what we're doing is materially different to any other FX shop out there. No disrespect to the big brands, but it is like fundamentally what we're doing isn't being done anywhere else. Now that may just be enough of a seed for somebody who's very good and very loyal to one of the incumbent big brands to go, yeah, actually I do want to take a step down in terms of the size of the brand that I represent, but arguably a step up in the service or the product or or the tech or the development or any of these other touch points that we bring to that contract between employer and employee. And so that's what I like to focus on. It's like, let's engage with somebody who is perfectly happy in their job and see if we can tease them over to the other side. Not to the dark side, just the other side.
So for candidates coming into the industry fresh or with a bit of sales experience from outside that are looking to get into FX, what would you say are the 3 key points you would give someone, or key bits of advice for someone coming in?
There's 2 separate answers. What I would look for is attention, be attentive in the interview, obviously show up on time, don't be a bad end. Can you say that?
Yeah, I think you can say that, yeah.
And do your research. The number of times I've asked the question of why do you want to work here, and they don't really have an answer other than, well, my recruiter said to say this. And it's like immediately, right, if you don't have the time to read through
That's
the
not
website.
us though, right? We didn't do that. None of our candidates say that.
But yeah, do some research and turn up to an interview actually wanting the job. And yeah, fair enough, sometimes in role profiles there isn't enough clarity. That's what the question section's for. And yeah, so advice, very much research, visualize yourself in that company, in that role. Does that tick the boxes for, how long you want to satisfy the next step in your career? Personally, if I can't see myself sort of really succeeding or retiring from a company, I'd question why I wanted to start there. But again, similarly, you may just be wanting a bit of experience so you can move on in a certain time period. And be honest about it. I would not have a problem effectively sponsoring talent for 2 years. Come fresh from university, have a good 2-year stint, and then potentially move on. No problem at all. But that's because I back myself and we've got the flexibility in our business to, if you're good enough and your talent I want to retain, I'll find something else for you to do. Don't you worry about that. But yeah, I think there is too much, I suppose, focus on like the internship, the serial interners who, again, when I came out of uni, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So it's not a criticism of lack of experience, but that whole try before you buy is all well and good in a month or 3 month intern. But when you're applying for a job, be honest. And because if you're not, it will probably come through. And then you'll be disregarded.
There's quite a big disparity that we see of candidates who, when you're speaking of a company, they're almost doing it for job's sake compared to people who come back and be like, I've researched this, I found out this, like, I know this.
And do you know why?
All of that, and it screams volumes.
Because it's bloody hard work. And I remember when I got my degree, I was like, oh yeah, I've done it. And then this sense of entitlement came in. It's like, right, where are the jobs? And it's not actually that easy. And I remember just punting out application after application just because it was a done thing and I was out of work. But yeah, absolutely. If any one of those had just picked up the phone going, I've just got your CV, why do you want the job? I just want a job would have been the honest answer. And, I think you need to invest a little bit more time in the process. A, if you're going to succeed, and B, if it's going to be a success for you. Because, my first job wasn't a good fit because I hadn't done enough research, I didn't know enough about the actual market that it was serving, and ultimately when I started doing it, I wasn't interested in it.
Most people fail their jobs because they didn't research. They had an vision of what that's going to be, and it wasn't that vision in their head 6 months later, so they leave the position. It's something that happens time and again.
It's something for the recruiters to do.
Well,
certainly for the graduate talent coming through, it's like, do you know what you're getting into? It's like, yeah, I've read the role profile. Yeah, but have you read the website from top to toe? No. Well, why don't you go and do that before the interview? Because you want to align your aspirations, what you back as your talent, and what you think they're looking for, both in terms of what we understand from the client, what the role profiles suggest, and what we've discussed privately. Because if you can marry those two together, then wonderful. Hopefully your conversion will improve.
Tip for us.
what are you trying to say?
But it won't. No, what I'm saying is it's difficult on both sides because the investment of time that you've got to put into it with no guaranteed return. Everybody is time poor, but that's the biggest challenge. Now, the least time poor in the workplace are those with no experience. What are you doing right now? Nothing. Why not? Because I don't know what to do. Research, and then get a foot in the door and then perform.
Do you see automation taking into play, maybe headcount growth over the coming sort of 5-10 years?
That's an interesting one. We run everything via API where, at all possible, we've got that automatic connection. So the actual doing of the doing, the service is fully automated. So to a degree, yes, that could be seen as eroding the headcount necessary for the old dealer position. But from our perspective, no, that doesn't. The only difference between your archetypal dealer who's banging out calls and pricing, off Bloomberg and ours is that we don't book the deal. We will have all the relationship and talk to the client about the market and the timing and the relevance of transacting now or next week or what have you. But it's always from the perspective of, so when you're ready, log on and do it yourself. Our platform is very self-service. But so, no, I don't think automation should affect headcount growth. Ultimately, way back in the day when I started at Roosh International, they had an online system, Roosh Link to the OG, And I used to sell it.
Yeah.
Because we had a team of dealers, and they were all very good, most of them anyway, were very good at their job and client retention. But I saw the stats that if you get a client on RoucheLink, they're stickier, there's less attrition, and generally there's wider margin charged.
Yeah.
Music to my ear. More from less, done.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'd always sell the online system, where you've got, you know, a few of the elder statesmen in my sales team who are like, no, I don't really get it, don't like it, I want the control, I want to speak to my clients all the time. It's like, cool, horses for courses, but having that ability to allow your client to transact anytime is a wonderful benefit to the wider business. Having the relationship with your client is irreplaceable.
Yeah.
Where a business will let that dust settle, you know, maybe we may see a little bit more client base swell, because, well, if X% of your client base is trading online, you can manage more clients. Absolutely, we've got data that supports that. But that gets to a head of steam where you've got too many clients. And as a result, you're underserving your client base. We need to recruit.
So that's why headcount will still maintain, because you'll end up onboarding more customers as opposed to having less staff.
There will just be a change in the ratio between headcount and client base.
Fair enough, yeah.
Do you not think that it's potentially more like a generation thing? Now that the younger generation are coming through and they're very low touch, they don't need to speak, it's all self-sufficient. I mean, I think I opened a bank account and never spoke to someone. I'm so used to going in, signing forms, face to face. Do you think in time that is actually going to run its course and we will lose that kind of human touch?
Tricky one. I mean, I don't know. Don't have that crystal ball that the FX brokers always sit behind. But from a behavioural perspective, I see that a lot more. You know, what's going on with this client? Don't know, I sent him an email. Have you spoken to him? Oh, I'll send him another email. And that is the generational shift. Back in the day when email was a thing, I'm not that old, but still it was like phone first. Everything was phone first. And I really still try and instill that in, even in our business. Like we've got a number of different geographies and even through the immediacy and the connectivity that Slack, Google Meets and all this provides, there's nothing better than picking up the phone and having a conversation to ensure you've got that level of understanding. By all means, pop some notes, as per the conversation, this is what on you, I'm going to do this and summarize everything. Yeah. But if I send a request to you, like the inner monologue when I'm writing it is very different to the inner monologue when you're reading it. And as a result, that interpretation is always at risk of a disconnect. Yeah. So yes, I do think there is a transition of wider services to, you can sign up without talking to anybody. But at the same time, where you've got that area of the market swelling, you've also got additional value that a different demographic put in, I've got somebody to speak to. And that's something that we sell on. No disrespect to any of the wonderful unicorns that are out there that you can open an account in 10 minutes. It fascinates me to go through that onboarding process. But when my payment doesn't arrive, what do? I sit there in a panic thinking, where's my money? Where's my money? And having somebody to pick up the phone and go, where's my money, is comforting because you get an answer.
I recently applied for a personal loan and it was accepted within like 5 minutes and the money was in my account that afternoon. Didn't have to show my ID or anything. I just gave my passport number and information. And I'm not going to lie, it scared the living days out of me. I called them up just to make sure that this is right.
Do you know who I am?
You know my credit history? You don't know.
Getting this money back.
No, but it was just more taken away, like how easy it was, how fluent and quick. And actually, I find that concerning, right? Because I'm from a world of everything's checked, everything's compliance orientated. You're triple checking. It's that measure twice, cut once kind of mentality. Whereas nowadays, it's if you fill out that form incorrectly, could you be breaking laws? Could you be, where's this automation taking us, and how much present risk does it present?
The business model that sits behind that, again, is going to be APIs all over the show, validating the data that you put in. And as a result, if you have a fat finger moment and say that, I don't know, you're
the validation will flag
32 instead of whatever age you are, then there should be a flag that will kick back an error. I wish I was 32, They wouldn't lend you what you borrowed, I'm sure. But you know, that's where the power of tech provides efficiencies and removes all of that paperwork and check twice, you know, cut once kind of.
So I guess we're just not still thinking it as individuals when you're going to apply for these financials.
But also, you know, then you've got the wider picture, which is like we're just coming to the end of the age of cheap money, which is like, what, since 2008, they've just been throwing money at the problem and trying to give it away. And, you know, so lenders, prime example of, I'm just literally throwing it out there trying to find a return. Yes, there's going to be a default rate, but every lender has done that, you know, data analysis in order to fulfill their business model. But the quicker I can get you approved and actually get money into your bank account, the quicker I can forecast I'm going to get a return off this guy, and you know, and hopefully make some business growth for my shareholders.
Yeah.
Short and sweet question: crypto and FX, can we ever see them ever working alongside each other?
Not for a while. Not for a while. I mean, you know, the risk appetite of the bigger incumbent banks towards, you know, an asset class that frankly they don't understand well enough. There's a clear disconnect, right? So you've got a number of new startups that are coming through with new banking relationships that have appetite for it, and they're going great guns. But where the two will converge over time, I genuinely don't know. But I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to that. I never saw a day where I would go and buy my newspaper with a bit of a Bitcoin. And, you know, then you've got the other side of that, which is the adoption. How many shops are going to accept Bitcoin payment? Now, again, Bitcoin obviously is the brand name there that everybody recognizes when crypto's in conversation. But, you know, there is definitely a place for it already. You know, the transfer of value through the blockchain, Ripple are doing this very well. You know, and that just brings in an extra leg. Instead of Swift, you go sterling, crypto BRL, and a local payment, all in, you know, pretty much real time. That's very exciting. But the provenance of the coin is what the banks are all concerned about. You know, go back in the archives, you've got Mt. Gox, and all the early adopters were unsavory. Because, untraceable, brilliant, I'm in with my gun money or my drug money or whatever.
Basically, everything compliance says, no, we can't work with that. Exactly. There you go,
Exactly, but, you know, I even heard a story where it got to a point that if you send me a Bitcoin, I'd pay you for it, of course, but and then I convert that to sterling and try and pay it out, they're worried not that I had the Bitcoin correct. It's like, well, what happened to it who are you? And who did you buy it off?
Fine.
And it's like, you know.
So though it's not regulated, they still ask those questions. Where's it coming from? What's this for? And
it's not even that they ask the questions. That's the concern that they haven't got the control parameters set up for yet. And so if I don't know, I'm not going to do it, which is very prudent compliance.
And this is where everyone's now in trouble because they've all bought their cryptos and then they're going to go sell it back and go back to market and.
Yeah, for the market who's bought crypto, like, you know, as a store of value or an investment or what have you, regardless of where the market is at the moment. But that's unaffected. Other than, and again, I'm sure a lot of crypto people out there will have had experience either directly or indirectly where my exchange or my platform can't accept money or can't pay out at the moment. And it's because whoever was ultimately banking them has had a change of, you know, policy, risk appetite, or their bank said actually no more crypto going through my account, and they've had to pivot and go and find a new partner that would service them. But you know, so if you had a Bitcoin, don't worry, you can still sell that on an exchange and get your sterling back from it, but it won't be through any of the banking relationships that, you know, that we're very well versed in the FX market.
And I guess subject to their fees of the other suppliers you're using and everything as well, right?
Yeah, but again, like that, as I understand it, that's one of the efficiencies. The lower transactional, charges applied to crypto is again evolving, and you know, all the new age kids thinking, that's why it's the end of fiat, because it's so much more efficient. But yeah, it's still very early for me, still very much in proof of concept. I don't think it's ever going to go away, but I don't know how long it's going to take for it to really have a strong chunk of the fiat transactional. And you've only got to look at, Ukraine and Russia. When they were frozen from SWIFT, there's the blockchain to transfer value. So yeah, ultimately the decentralized currency play that all the geeks used to down with the big man. It's like, well, you kind of didn't see it working like that, did you?
But it's interesting how the regulators have gone into it, because they're now saying that rather than sort of regulating the crypto as a whole, they're saying that for the big accounts, the big providers of the apps and the online accounts, they're saying, okay, but you have to have the identity, the identity checks, the proof of ID and stuff like that for the actual account. You can still get wallets which are not attached to any account, but if you want to use those big brands that are trusted that can do all the transactions, you have to have your ID allocated to it. So it's their sort of way of kind of
news to me. I don't know enough about the actual transactional experience, but I just assume there's KYC against anybody. I wouldn't expect to be able to buy a Bitcoin without somebody knowing who I was.
Yeah, you'd expect so, yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be very interesting to see where things are in 5 years' time with all.
Yeah, I just want to see where it develops to. Will the industries kind of merge together? Will all the FX firms jump on crypto as like another option for payment?
Well, HMRC have also come out and said that any gains from crypto are now eligible for capital gains tax, but you have to actually go and declare.
Well, it's because they've now given out debit cards and things, so you can physically spend it now, can't you?
It's a little bit more traceable, but yeah. So technology is going to be a huge part of currency transfer's growth. What can we expect to see from you guys in the future?
Ooh, product roadmap. Well, so we are going to embrace kind of banking as a service, and we touched on it earlier, like the migration from FX to payments to banking, and again, without getting too caught up in the jargon, all that means is that we're very comfortable making same currency payments. And so, the age-old sales process of if we can take care of all of your payments, can we have your FX? It's a convenience play. So yeah, like an extension of the wallet experience where the clients have got an account in their own name that they can credit and pay out from, identified as them. Open banking allows for, the equivalent of direct debit settlement, but, click of a button and a much quicker settlement piece. And, again, we live and die by integrations. And if it can be integrated, it can be automated, and that's where the efficiency comes from. So, there are a number of different touch points within the client journey that we're looking to, and we can do that, and we can do that, and we can do that as well. And just provide the holistic service, and hopefully that becomes a lot stickier. But yeah, very much, probably by the end of this year, next year will be, I think, where clients are using the currency transfer platform, or Plexus as it may be by then, for a lot more than just their FX and payments.
Nice.
We've already got some hedging products. We've got a vanilla option. I think maybe even a participating forward as well, via API. Anything more structured than that obviously still sits within the regulations of phone brokerage, and we've got a great partner in Assure Hedge for that. But yeah, the transactional life cycle of a client, we're looking to expand the touch points and, by extension of that, expand the wallet share where, we could make money doing that. We could make money doing that. That could be a chargeable event because it adds value to the client. So yeah, the product roadmap is one of the it always has been actually one of the really exciting bits about working at Currency Transfer. I even remember like way back when I started, I used to sit next to Stefan, who's a co-founder and CTO as he was then, and we would just like have a call with a client. The client would make a suggestion, and I'd put the phone down and go, Steph, I've got this great idea. And he'd go, yeah, that's a good idea, Paul. And he'd code it in, and by the next week, it would be live on the platform. And then when Steph wasn't listening, I'd phone the client and go, that idea you had? Well, check the platform, it's live, well done.
Nice,
and, internally, I got the accolades, and that's all that matters, right?
Love that.
Nice, yeah. No, good. So a lot of exciting things to come.
Yeah. Plenty on the roadmap. It's very exciting. It's good stuff.
I think something that's always been present for us is it's quite well known that brokers really only have about 20% of the market as opposed to the banks in terms of foreign exchange and payments. Do you think brokers can ever dominate the market? And if so, how do you think they'd get there?
No, I don't. I think it's impossible because all the brokers rely on the banks.
Yeah.
And there is always, like, for years, the banks could have put the brokerage industry out of work by just going, A, I'm not going to bank you, and B, I'm going to tighten my prices and provide a decent service to your clients. But there's just the incumbent cost. So for them, it's more efficient to agree you can do all the hard work and the customer service and everything that we were paying quite banking salaries for. And it just outsources that customer service piece. So they're still sat at the top of the chain, comfortably taking all the flow, going onto their trading floors for the spec traders to do what they do with it, without any of the overhead, the cost, the nuisance, the complaints that do happen, and all of the incumbent cost that comes with facing a client directly. And yeah, I mean, again, so many people have gone through this whole life cycle where, if you've got a metal banded book, bronze, silver, gold, platinum, or whatever, the bronze book are typically your nuisance payments because they don't make you very much money, and typically those are the ones that complain and take up a lot of time. And that's what the banks have done. They've outsourced. Bronze book with jettisoned it. You want to look after them? Wonderful. Fill your boots. And make a decent living out of that, no problem at all. But get the flow through to me against my rules on the policy that we've agreed. So I'm very comfortably insured against the AML risk. But yeah, the brokerage would have to create their own banking licenses and provide banking services and then take over, bite away at the flow that way. And there's always going to be, that big section, the top end of the institutional money that would never bother with brokerage. The value of price and service. When you're prime brokerage, no, thanks very much. Phone up, I want half a yard now. Why? Because I'm looking at Bloomberg. Never mind, just get on with it and execute.
Okay, so maybe this then. Do you think brokers will become banks?
Well, Western Union did.
Yeah.
And then they rebranded. So I don't know how well that worked out.
We're still being rebranded at the moment, isn't it? It's to come still. Yeah.
I personally never saw the fit, but I didn't experience that from the inside. I was very much an outside spectator, and I don't know what the value prop was. I don't know what the sales, the service that they took to market as a bank was. Yeah. But for me personally, banking just screams inefficiency. Yeah. And so I would be uncomfortable if any of my stakeholders came around and go, got a great idea, we're going to become a bank. It's like, see you later.
It's time to jump ship, yeah.
But even that said, there are some very exciting startup banks out there that are, again, they're chipping away and revolutionising a demographic of the banking market. But is that ever going to be relevant to the institutional flows that we don't currently service? No, absolutely not. It's just bringing efficiency and getting market share at the bottom end of the bronze book.
You do see with Revolut, they've put a lot of pressure with their API on the banks to up their services and their online platforms, but that's all the very low end. It's all the personal retail.
Yeah, I mean, look, so I've lived through a number of banking migrations, and the one constant through all of that is banks are inefficient. Their tech stack is archaic. There are so many bugs, problems, unforeseen issues that, the bottom-up driver of a clean code organization like Revolut, where you come new to the problem that you're addressing and you've got fresh eyes and you've got the most recent technical capabilities.
You're not building on old legacy systems that don't work anymore and don't fit this market anymore.
So when Roosh was bought by Travelex, Rooshlink was quite a nice little platform. Post migration, the two systems didn't talk to each other, and it's like, well, who bought that? I can say that now, I don't work there. But
I was only saying earlier to someone, you need to be careful with developers nowadays because they'll recommend you technologies that they know will be outdated in several years' time. So you'll have to bring that same developer back in to redevelop, redesign, and build it all back out again. Cheeky,
but I didn't know that existed, but that's a wonderful position that we're in, having a co-founder as a CTO. So
you can't have them all pulled over your eyes. Yeah,
absolutely.
That 2-hour job takes 2 weeks. Yeah, it does it. So something big for me, because obviously I value being online, using your online presence to help with your sales ability, rather than just cold call and go in blind. I personally believe you have to have a presence about yourself. And one thing I notice is candidates value their Facebooks and their Instagrams, and everyone's got followers and they're looking for likes and comments. No one's really necessarily doing this on the business platforms to help their career. So I guess the question to you is, do you think salespeople need to develop themselves now to have an online presence to be able to maintain their goals and their achievements?
Yeah, very much. But it's a very difficult one to navigate. If you want to reference FX Plu. But no, because, would I be comfortable with a junior member of staff coming in and effectively representing my brand with the experimentation that we had in the early days, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's a cliche to say, but if you're not embarrassed with what you took to market, you launched too late. And if you go back in the archives, FX Blue was dreadful. But where you've got somebody's brand sat behind, your employer, how you represent that is a minefield. So on one hand, yes, I absolutely support the idea of a better, stronger LinkedIn presence, but it comes with so many caveats.
Yeah.
And that's up to the employer, the HR, and again, similar to the compliance piece we talked about earlier. If you don't understand it, if you haven't got it worked out, you're going to say no. But I think there is land grab opportunity there in the market of becoming well known for this, that, the other, whatever. Again, FX Blue is just doing that market brief every day. Every day. No, best part of my day. I love it. And there are many out there that also do video market briefs, and strengths and weaknesses of all of them. Yeah. But it's about finding your niche, and in order to really, I think, break out and start building a brand for yourself, you need to have the support of your employer. And so typically it's more likely to come from a marketing department. And then from the sales side, it's like, well, what do they actually know about sales? Yeah. And you've got that, marketing, sales compliance, they're always butting
I've always found that they manage things separately in most companies, and I find that baffling, because all your sales guys are your marketing guys. Every single one of them could be on social media presenting your products, your services, as well as calling people up and doing all of that. And for some reason, many people haven't quite grasped that you use all channels. Well,
so there's an interesting point, right? When you get somebody into your business, the first thing you do is train them. So the sales pitch, whether it starts with a script or just your general brand values of how we communicate our service to the market. So there are rules applied to the training. Yeah. That same model would need to be applied to social media, right? So I'm lucky enough to be involved in the creator program with LinkedIn, and as a result, we have like meetings with other creators, and it's fascinating seeing, the restrictions that JP Morgan, for example, Goldman Sachs put on their employees. Effectively, it's a blanket ban. You are not allowed to talk about anything to do with our bank, the market, or the service that any of our departments offer. Because, again, there are regulations. It may be financial advice, it may be deemed as this, that, and the other, and there may be big fines that are the...
So I suppose in our industry, it can be risky to have your staff online as well.
But however, where, again, a couple of wonderful influencers that I was blessed with an audience with, where they're navigating it and building their own personal brand is through objective, useful content. Just give. Whatever, advertise. That's ultimately what the social media should be. If I closed off every FX Plu with either the influencer, don't forget to like, comment and share, or subscribe or whatever, like everybody would be thumbs down, see you later. And similarly, if it was trying to crowbar a sales pitch in, so if you're looking to buy a house overseas, then don't forget to phone me. It's like, okay, just stick to the market chatter and Boris bashing. That's what I tuned in for. And so, but at the same time, if you get the focus right, and I'm not saying that I have by any stretch of the imagination, but if you get the focus right, the content that you put out, by extension, is always associated with the brand that you're working for. Yeah. And again, funnily enough, that is actually a challenge that our head of marketing is struggling with right now. We've got FX Blue and we've got Currency Transfer, and soon we're going to have Plexus. And it's like, we've got 3 different brands there almost. and only one of them is fun.
Have you seen quite a lot of new clients coming your way off the back of the FX Plu, your videos that you do?
Well, I mean, obviously I'm going to say, yeah, loads, but the truth is no. Because
but
again,
it's brand awareness.
Exactly, and I never did it for client acquisition. There shouldn't be a binary relationship in your mind when you're curating it and when you're putting it out there that, oh, I'm doing this because I want that.
Yeah.
You're doing that because that's the project.
Yeah.
What comes from that is wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time that we had an application of where did you hear about us, this donut on an air wheel. So, oh yeah, that's me. But does that happen very often? Certainly not. But where I'm assured and Pat, no, you do you, charge the air wheel and off you go, keep going, is from the unknown.
Yeah.
You know, the expectation that you can't be doing that all the time and not have client flow being affected by it. Yeah. Even if it's just a case of subliminally. Oh yeah, go on. And then you see it somewhere else because of the SEO that we're very good at.
Yeah.
It's just, oh yeah, fine. And then
I don't think anyone's going to be able to duplicate what you do. You were the first one out there.
set a high bar, right?
Well, you massively. But I have a question.
I mean, it's hard enough talking to camera, but do it on a unicycle.
Though. What do you read off? Like, what? How is this?
Literally, I've got a selfie stick.
Oh, you do?
That's all memory. That's all just prepared.
No, not memory. A selfie stick with the phone on it.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah. Okay, so you've got it all in front of you.
No, so the video's in front of me. I'm just like scooting around.
I remember having discussions in the office about it, and we were like, where is he reading this from, or is it just off the top?
Yeah, like, are you just that good at presenting?
I do have notes. Like, so my morning routine, like, 5 a.m. shout out, if that's worth anything. 5:50 my alarm goes off. 6 o'clock I've got a coffee and I'm putting the notes together. By sort of 6:30, 7 o'clock, hair and makeup. Well, hair anyway. And then Bertie gets his walk. We go out. Jump
have you had any like bloopers where people have stopped you and asked you what you're doing, or run into you, or anything?
Yeah. So there's a blooper reel pinned on my LinkedIn, and one of my favourites is this grumpy old man in lockdown, and I was just like chatting away, and then like noticed him sort of behind a tree, and he goes, "Are you filming?" And I was like, well,
why
I was.
are you behind a tree?
Until you ruined it, yeah.
And like we stopped filming that. It's a real shame because the rest of the conversation was gold, because he was like, well, I don't want to be on your film. I was like, well, you're on a public footpath. This isn't illegal. And it's like, well, have you got to hide anyway?
Why are you behind a tree?
And he
wasn't in a hood or anything like that.
No, he's just like some grumpy old man like back in. And funny enough, like he became my nemesis for about 2 or 3 weeks. And I sat and I thought about it, and the next time I saw him, I scooted over and said, I apologise, I was a bigger man. Like now we're best friends. Oh, morning, how are you doing? But yeah.
Get him on the film next time now.
Rocky old start, yeah.
Well, look, thanks very much for coming in, Paul. It's been a pleasure having you, and thanks for coming to speak to us.
My pleasure.
Thanks
for having me in.